Hello, and welcome to another video from the YouTube channel, From Religion to Agnostic. Today we are going to look at the biblical figure Jared in the antediluvian period. Jared or Yared, meaning to descend, in the book of Genesis, was a sixth-generation descendant of Adam and Eve. His primary history is recounted in Genesis 5:18 through 20. According to the book of Enoch, Mahalalel named his son, Jared, descent, because during his lifetime the angels of the Lord who were called watchers descended to earth to teach mankind and to do what is just and upright upon the earth. Jared was born 460 years after the creation of Adam and died in 1422, aged 962 years. Additionally, Jared was a forefather of Noah and his 3 sons. Jared's age was given as 962 years old when he died, making him the second oldest person mentioned in the Hebrew Bible and the Septuagint. In the Samaritan Pentateuch, his age was 62 at fatherhood and only 847 at death, making Noah the oldest and Jared the 7th oldest. As for his modern scholarship, or even his biblical details other than what is mentioned in Genesis, I haven't found any other information than what's here. The biblical details about Jared, like the other long-lived patriarchs, are in the book of Genesis. In terms of the documentary hypothesis, the passage about the descendants of Adam in Genesis 5:1 through 32 is attributed to the priestly source. A parallel passage, Genesis 4:17 through 22, which contains a genealogy of the descendants of Cain, is attributed to the Yahwist, another ancient version of the same original genealogy. The two genealogies contain 7 similar names, and the Yahwist's version of the genealogy has Irad in the place of Jared. Okay, so once again we return to the documentary hypothesis mentioned in my earlier videos. Yes, it comes up a lot, so one should definitely research it. Let's go to the Scroll of Jubilees. In the apocryphal book of Jubilees, chapter 4:15 through 20, his mother's name is Dinah. Jubilees states that Jared married a woman whose name is variously spelled as Baraka, and Baraka, and the Bible speaks of Jared having become father to other sons and daughters, Genesis 5:13. Of those children, only Enoch is named specifically, born when Jared was 162 years old, Genesis 5:18, 5:22a, 5:24, Hebrews 11:5b, Jude 14 and 15. Enoch went on to marry Edna, according to Jubilees, and the sole named grandchild of Jared is Enoch's son Methuselah, the longest living human mentioned in the Bible, Genesis 5:18, 5:21, 5:27. And in the second week of the 10th Jubilee 449 to 55 AM, Mahalalel took unto him to wife Dinah, the daughter of Barachiel, the daughter of his father's brother, and she bare him a son in the 3rd week in the 6th year, 461 AM, and he called his name Jared, for in his days the angels of the Lord descended on the earth, those who are named the watchers, that they should instruct the children of men, and that they should do judgment in uprightness on the earth. And in the 11th Jubilee 512 to 18 AM, Jared took to himself a wife, and her name was Baraka, the daughter of Arasuel, a daughter of his father's brother, in the 4th week of this Jubilee, 5:22 AM, and she bare him a son in the 5th week, in the 4th year of the Jubilee, and he called his name Enoch. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe Enoch, the 7th from Adam, son of Jared, and father of Methuselah, in Genesis 5:18 through 24, Luke 3:37, Hebrews 11:5. The biblical account of Enoch is scanty. It tells us that he was translated but gives nothing of the details of his ministry. A quotation from his prophecy is found in Jude 1:14. From latter-day revelation we learn much more of Enoch. Specifically of his preaching, his city called Zion, his visions, and his prophecies. See D&C 107:48 through 57, Moses 6 and 7. From these sources we observe that he was a preacher of righteousness and a vigorous exponent of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We also note that not only Enoch but also his entire city was translated. We also become aware that Enoch was a much greater person with a far more significant ministry than one would ever suppose from the Bible alone. Speaking of being, quote, a much greater person, as it states, let's take a minute to realize how things have changed over time. And what it was like back then versus now. Back then in the antediluvian period. In the Christian Bible and Hebrew Torah, the antediluvian period begins with the fall of the first man and woman, according to Genesis, and ends with the destruction of all life on the earth except those saved with Noah in the ark, Noah and his wife, his 3 sons and their wives. According to Bishop Usher's 17th century chronology, the antediluvian period lasted for 1,656 years, from creation, some say the fall of man, at 4004 BC to the flood at 2348 BC. The elements of the narrative include some of the best-known stories in the Bible: the creation, Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel, followed by the genealogies tracing the descendants of Cain and Seth, the third mentioned son of Adam and Eve. These genealogies provide the framework for the biblical chronology, in the form A lived X years and begot B. The Bible speaks of this era as being a time of great wickedness. There were Gibborim, giants, in the earth in those days, as well as Nephilim. Some Bible translations identify the two as one and the same. The Gibborim were unusually powerful. Genesis calls them mighty men which were of old, men of renown. The antediluvian period ended when God sent the flood to wipe out all life except Noah, his family, and the animals they took with them. Nevertheless, the Nephilim, literally meaning fallen ones, from the Hebrew root n, f, l, to fall, reappear much later in the biblical narrative, in Numbers 13:31-33, where the spies sent forth by Moses report that there were Nephilim, or giants, in the promised land. That's what the Bible says. But science, on the other hand. Early scientific attempts at reconstructing the history of the earth were founded on the biblical narrative and thus used the term antediluvian to refer to a period understood to be essentially similar to the biblical one. Early scientific interpretation of the biblical narrative divided the antediluvian into sub-periods based on the 6 days of creation. Pre-Adamitic, the first 5 days, Genesis 1:1 to Genesis 2:3, primary, the formation of the physical universe and the earth; secondary, creation of plants and animals; Adamitic, or tertiary, from the creation of man to the Great Flood, Genesis 2:5 to Genesis 7:8, corresponding to St. Augustine's first age of his 6 ages of the world. Prior to the 19th century, rock was classified into 3 main types: primary or primitive, igneous and metamorphic rock; secondary, sedimentary rock; and tertiary, sediments. The primary rocks, like granite and gneiss, are void of fossils and were thought to be associated with the very creation of the world in the primary pre-Adamitic period. The secondary rocks, often containing copious fossils, though human remains had not been found, were thought to have been laid down in the secondary pre-Adamitic period. The tertiary rocks, sediments, were thought to have been put down after creation and possibly in connection to a flood event, and were thus associated with the Adamitic period. The post-flood period was termed the Quaternary, a name still in use in geology. As mapping of the geological strata progressed in the early decades of the 19th century, the estimated lengths of the various sub-periods were greatly increased. The fossil-rich secondary pre-Adamitic period was divided up into the Coal period, the Lias, and the Chalk period, later expanded into the now familiar geologic time scale of the Phanerozoic. The term antediluvian was used in natural science well into the 19th century and lingered in popular imagination despite increasingly detailed stratigraphy mapping the Earth's past, and was often used for the Pleistocene period, where humans existed alongside now extinct megafauna. Megafauna, meaning in terrestrial zoology, the megafauna comprises the large or giant animals of an area, habitat, or geological period. The most common thresholds used are weight over 40 kilograms, 90 pounds, or 44 kilograms, 100 pounds, or over a ton, 1,000 kilograms, 2,205 pounds. Extra sources I found about that time are writers such as William Whiston, A New Theory of the Earth, 1696, and Henry Morris, The Genesis Flood, 1961, who launched the modern creationist movement, described the antediluvian period as follows. People lived much longer than those alive today, typically between 700 and 950 years, as reported in the genealogies of Genesis. The earth contained many more people than it did in 1696. Whiston calculated that as many as 500 million humans may have been born in the antediluvian period, based on assumptions about lifespans and fertility rates. There were no clouds or rain. Instead, the earth was watered by mists which rose from the earth. Another interpretation is that Earth was covered completely by a global cloud layer, which was the upper waters mentioned in the creation. This is commonly called the vapor canopy view. However, There has since been debate among creationists over the authenticity of arguments such as the one that there was no rain before the flood, and previous ideas about what the antediluvian world was like are constantly changing. Well, that will do it for this video. Have a great day, and be safe. If you enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing, as well as hitting the like and sharing would help out a lot. Thank you all. Peace out, people.